Gabriel Garcia Marquez, affectionately known as Gabo, was born in 1927 in Aracataca, Colombia. Growing up in a small town steeped in folklore and family stories, he developed a deep appreciation for the power of narrative. Garcia Marquez became a leading figure in the Latin American literary boom, a movement that introduced the world to the region's rich and diverse storytelling traditions. His distinctive writing style, which seamlessly blends the ordinary with the extraordinary, helped define the genre of magical realism. Published in 1967, 100 Years of Solitude, Cien Años de Soledad, stands as Garcia Marquez's most celebrated work and a masterpiece of magical realism. The novel chronicles the rise and fall of the Buendia family over 7 generations, intertwining fantastical events with everyday life in the fictional town of Macondo. Its universal themes and groundbreaking narrative style earned Garcia Marquez the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1982, cementing his place among the greatest writers of all time. At its core, 100 Years of Solitude is a profound exploration of the human experience. It examines the cycles of family and history, delving into themes of memory, identity, and the inescapable influence of the past. Through its richly layered storytelling, the novel reveals how history repeats itself and how individuals navigate the solitude that comes with love, loss, and self-discovery. Now let's dive into the story itself and uncover the world of Macondo and the unforgettable Buendia family. The story begins with José Arcadio Buendia and his wife, Ursula Iguaran, fleeing their hometown to escape the consequences of a tragic event. Driven by José Arcadio's dream of creating a new utopian community, they wander through uncharted territory until they reach a remote and fertile plain, surrounded by rivers and mountains. It is there that they decide to establish the village of Macondo, a place untouched by the outside world and brimming with possibility. José Arcadio Buendia is a visionary, full of boundless energy and imagination. He envisions Macondo as a self-sufficient paradise, a place where he can build a better life for his family and future generations. He works tirelessly to lay the village's foundation, organizing its structure and assigning roles to its early inhabitants. His dedication to Macondo's success is unwavering, and his ambition sets the tone for the family's legacy. Ursula Iguaran, José Arcadio's equally determined wife, plays an indispensable role in Macondo's creation. Unlike her husband, whose head is often lost in the clouds of grand ideas, Ursula is practical, resourceful, and grounded. She not only manages the household but also ensures the survival of the fledgling village, taking on the role of a leader when necessary. Her strength and resilience serve as the backbone of the Buendia family, a trait that will echo through generations. In its early years, Macondo is portrayed as a paradise of unspoiled beauty and innocence. The village thrives in its isolation, free from the corruption and complications of the outside world. The river flows clear and pure, the soil yields abundant crops, and the air is filled with a sense of boundless potential. For the villagers, life in Macondo feels like a dream, untouched by time or external forces. This sense of wonder is heightened by the arrival of Melquiades, a mysterious gypsy who brings strange inventions and exotic knowledge to Macondo. Melquiades introduces José Arcadio Buendia to the wonders of science and alchemy, sparking in him an insatiable curiosity about the world. Through Melquiades, José Arcadio learns about magnets, alchemical formulas, and the concept of perpetual motion. These discoveries ignite a passion for experimentation that will shape his destiny, and in turn, the fate of his family. In the earliest days of Macondo, José Arcadio Buendia is the village's visionary leader. Yet his insatiable curiosity and obsession with uncovering the secrets of the universe slowly consume him. Fascinated by the knowledge brought by the gypsy Melquiades, José Arcadio throws himself into alchemy, convinced that he can transform base metals into gold or discover perpetual motion. His experiments, however, yield no tangible results, and frustration takes hold. He becomes increasingly erratic, muttering cryptic phrases and retreating from his family. His obsession isolates him from the world, leaving Ursula to shoulder the burden of running the household and raising their children. Eventually, José Arcadio's mind unravels completely. He is found one day sitting beneath a chestnut tree in the courtyard, lost in his own thoughts. For the rest of his life, he remains there, tied to the tree to prevent him from wandering off. He speaks in riddles, his words seemingly nonsensical but laced with a strange prophetic wisdom. The sight of him, a once great man reduced to solitude and madness, becomes a poignant symbol of the Buendia family's tendency toward isolation, a fate that will repeat itself in various forms across generations. The second generation of the Buendia family introduces a new layer of complexity, particularly through the relationship between Amaranta and Rebecca, two strong-willed and passionate women. Rebecca is adopted into the family as a young girl, arriving in Macondo clutching a bag of her parents' bones. Though an outsider by blood, she is welcomed into the household and becomes an integral part of the Buendia family. Rebecca and Amaranta grow up together, initially forming a close bond as sisters. However, their relationship takes a dark turn when they both fall in love with the same man, Pietro Crespi, an elegant and charming Italian pianola salesman. Rebecca's beauty and exotic allure win Pietro's affection, and he asks for her hand in marriage. Amaranta, consumed by jealousy and bitterness, vows to prevent the union at all costs. As Rebecca and Pietro prepare for their wedding, Amaranta's sabotage begins. She spreads rumors, delays the preparations, and even contemplates poisoning her sister. Ultimately, the marriage is called off, plunging Rebecca into despair. The failed relationship marks the beginning of Rebecca's withdrawal from the family. She later marries José Arcadio, her adoptive brother, in a scandalous union that shocks Macondo. Amaranta, for her part, remains trapped in her bitterness. She rejects Pietro's subsequent advances and spends the rest of her life alone, wearing a black bandage around her hand as a symbol of her unfulfilled love and guilt. The rivalry between Amaranta and Rebecca highlights the destructive power of jealousy and the emotional turbulence that defines the Buendia legacy. As Macondo grows, so does the Buendia family's influence. The arrival of new settlers and the expansion of trade bring wealth and prosperity to the village. The Buendias, as Macondo's founding family, enjoy a position of prominence. They accumulate land, livestock, and political power, becoming symbols of the town's success. This period of prosperity is marked by moments of grandeur, such as elaborate festivals and opulent weddings. The family's wealth allows them to indulge in luxuries, further distinguishing them from the other residents of Macondo. However, their rise to power is not without its costs. The family's newfound status brings internal conflicts and a growing detachment from the ideals of its founders. The simplicity and unity that defined José Arcadio and Ursula's vision for Macondo begin to erode. Greed, pride, and moral decay creep into the family dynamic, sowing the seeds of future discord. One striking example of this is José Arcadio, the son, whose physical strength and commanding presence make him a larger-than-life figure in Macondo. After leaving home in his youth, he returns as a domineering and reckless man, tattooed from head to toe and flaunting his wealth. His return disrupts the family's fragile harmony, leading to confrontations and further divisions. Despite their material success, the Buendia family is plagued by the same cycles of solitude and strife that began with their patriarch. Each generation experiences its own version of isolation, whether through unrequited love, unfulfilled ambitions, or an inability to connect with one another. The prosperity of the Buendia family and Macondo at large is a time of hope and expansion, yet it is laced with the tensions and flaws that will eventually lead to their downfall. The relationships between José Arcadio, Ursula, Amaranta, Rebecca, and others reveal the intricate web of love, rivalry, and ambition that drives the family forward while simultaneously pulling it apart. Macondo, once a place of idyllic isolation, is drawn into the tumult of the outside world as the winds of civil war reach its borders. At the center of this upheaval is Colonel Aureliano Buendia, the second son of José Arcadio and Ursula. Aureliano, whose early years were defined by a quiet introspection and a love of poetry, transforms into one of the most formidable and tragic figures in the Buendia family's history. Aureliano's path to revolution begins with his disillusionment with Macondo's growing entanglement with external political forces. Initially a contemplative and reserved young man, Aureliano becomes acutely aware of the injustices and inequalities plaguing the region. These realizations are amplified by his unfulfilled love for Remedios Moscote, a young girl who dies tragically soon after their marriage. Her death leaves Aureliano emotionally adrift, fueling his decision to seek meaning beyond the confines of Macondo. When the Liberal Party calls for rebellion against the conservative regime, Aureliano joins the cause, driven by a sense of justice and the belief that his actions can bring about a better future. He leaves Macondo, leaving behind his poetry and peaceful life, to become a leader in the Civil War. His transformation from a quiet dreamer into Colonel Aureliano Buendia, a hardened and legendary military figure, is one of the most striking arcs in the novel. Colonel Aureliano Buendia becomes a key figure in the conflict, commanding armies and leading battles across the region. He is a master strategist, winning countless victories and gaining fame as a fearless and indomitable leader. His reputation grows to mythical proportions, with stories of his exploits spreading far and wide. However, as the war drags on, Aureliano begins to lose sight of the ideals that first motivated him. The Civil War, originally fought for principles of justice and equality, devolves into a cycle of violence and revenge. Aureliano participates in endless campaigns, signing treaties only to break them, and fighting battles with no clear end. Over time, his victories feel hollow, and the war becomes an end in itself, a perpetual motion of conflict with no resolution. Aureliano's emotional detachment deepens as the war consumes him. He withdraws from personal relationships, even with his closest allies, and becomes increasingly isolated. His heart hardens to the point where he orders executions without hesitation, including that of a childhood friend who betrayed him. These actions, while cementing his legacy as a feared leader, also strip him of his humanity. As Aureliano wages war, Macondo, once a haven of peace and innocence, is pulled into the chaos. The town, which had thrived in its isolation, becomes a staging ground for military operations and political struggles. Soldiers march through its streets, and the once vibrant community is overshadowed by fear and uncertainty. The war brings corruption and moral decay to Macondo. The dreamlike tranquility that once defined the village gives way to the harsh realities of exploitation and betrayal. Political factions vie for control, promising progress but delivering only chaos. The physical and emotional scars of the war become etched into the town's fabric, mirroring the internal decay of the Buendia family. Despite his success as a military leader, Aureliano's victories bring him no satisfaction. As he grows older, he becomes disillusioned with the war and the cause for which he once fought. He realizes that the ideals of justice and equality have been corrupted, and that his role in the conflict has only perpetuated the cycle of violence. Haunted by the deaths he has caused and the lives he has ruined, Aureliano retreats into himself. He becomes a symbol of the novel's central theme, the inescapable solitude that defines human existence. Though surrounded by followers and soldiers, he feels utterly alone, unable to connect with those around him or find meaning in his achievements. In a poignant moment of reflection, Aureliano returns to Macondo after years of warfare. He attempts to write his memoirs, seeking to make sense of his life and leave a legacy beyond the battlefield. However, he finds the task impossible, as his memories of the war are fragmented, and his sense of purpose has long since faded. As the war comes to an end, Aureliano signs a peace treaty and relinquishes his command. However, the damage to Macondo is irreversible. The once thriving village is left scarred by years of conflict, its spirit broken and its future uncertain. The Buendia family, too, is deeply affected. Aureliano's emotional withdrawal mirrors the growing fragmentation of the family, as each generation becomes increasingly isolated from the others. Colonel Aureliano Buendia spends his final years in Macondo, crafting little gold fish in his workshop, tiny, intricate creations that symbolize both his unfulfilled potential and the futility of his life's work. These goldfish, endlessly made and melted down, become a metaphor for the cyclical nature of history and the solitude that defines his existence. Rebecca, the adopted daughter of the Buendia family, is at the center of one of Macondo's most enigmatic episodes. Her life is marked by both passion and mystery, and her marriage to José Arcadio, her adoptive brother, is a scandalous yet vibrant event. However, the joy of her wedding is soon eclipsed by a strange phenomenon that descends upon the village, the plague of insomnia. The plague begins innocuously, with villagers noticing they are staying awake later than usual. At first, this newfound sleeplessness seems almost a blessing, allowing people more time for work and leisure. However, the inability to sleep soon leads to more sinister consequences. As the insomnia takes hold, the villagers begin to lose their memories. Without dreams to replenish their minds, they forget the names of objects, the faces of loved ones, and even their own identities. Ursula takes charge, determined to preserve the village's collective memory. She labels every object in the house, chairs, clocks, doors, even animals, so that people will not forget their names. A sign is erected at the entrance to Macondo that reads, "God exists," a desperate attempt to cling to spiritual truths in the face of eroding memory. The insomnia plague, while fantastical, serves as a metaphor for the loss of innocence and the fragility of human identity. It captures the tension between progress and tradition, as Macondo's increasing interaction with the outside world brings both knowledge and existential uncertainty. Ultimately, the plague is lifted by the gypsy Melchiades, who returns with a potion that restores sleep and dreams to the villagers, symbolizing the power of storytelling and memory to restore order and meaning. Among the many magical events in the novel, none is as iconic or poignant as the ascension of Remedios the Beauty. A woman of extraordinary physical beauty and childlike innocence, Remedios lives in a world untouched by the complexities of human desire and ambition. Her presence in Macondo is both a blessing and a disruption, as her ethereal beauty mesmerizes the men around her, often leading them to madness or death. Despite the chaos she inadvertently causes, Remedios remains blissfully unaware of her effect on others. She spends her days performing mundane tasks, such as hanging laundry in the courtyard, embodying a purity that sets her apart from the rest of the Buendia family. One afternoon, as she hangs freshly washed sheets in the sun, a sudden and inexplicable gust of wind envelops her. Without warning, she is lifted into the air, ascending toward the heavens with the laundry flapping around her like wings. The scene is described with such simplicity and matter-of-factness that it feels entirely natural, despite its magical nature. The villagers watch in awe, but Remedios herself remains calm and untroubled, as though her ascension is the fulfillment of an inevitable destiny. Her departure is neither mourned nor celebrated. It is accepted as a part of life in Macondo, where the boundaries between the real and the supernatural are fluid. Remedios's ascension is rich with symbolism. It represents an escape from the burdens of human existence, love, conflict, and solitude that define the lives of the other Buendia family members. Her purity and detachment from earthly concerns allow her to transcend the cycles of suffering that entrap her relatives. As the Buendia family enters its 7th generation, both the family and the town of Macondo have succumbed to irrevocable decay. The once vibrant community, which had thrived under the vision and determination of its founders, now lies desolate. The streets are eerily empty, the homes are in disrepair, and the air of magic and vitality that once defined Macondo has been replaced by a sense of foreboding. The fate of the Buendia family mirrors that of the village, an inevitable decline shaped by cycles of repetition and the weight of the past. Aureliano Babylonia, one of the last surviving members of the Buendia family, stands at the center of this final chapter. Unlike his ancestors, Aureliano is deeply introspective and inquisitive. His life is marked by solitude and an insatiable curiosity, traits that lead him to uncover the family's forgotten history. In the ruins of the once prosperous Buendia household, Aureliano discovers the ancient manuscripts left behind by Melquiades, the enigmatic gypsy who introduced the wonders of the world to Macondo in its early days. These writings, cryptic and mysterious, hold the entire history of the Buendia family, written long before many of the events had even occurred. As Aureliano painstakingly deciphers the text, he comes to a chilling realization. The lives of the Buendia family members were preordained, bound by a curse of solitude, and doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. The manuscripts reveal that each generation was trapped in a cycle of ambition, love, and despair, unable to break free from the pattern set by their ancestors. The knowledge is both illuminating and devastating, as Aureliano understands that his fate, too, has been written long before his birth. The discovery of the manuscripts does not bring salvation. Instead, it deepens Aureliano's isolation. He sees himself as a mere echo of those who came before him, powerless to change the trajectory of his life or the ultimate fate of his family. The final moments of the Buendia family are marked by despair and destruction. Aureliano engages in a fleeting and taboo love affair with his aunt, Amaranta Ursula, the last woman of the family line. Their union, though passionate, results in the birth of a child with a pig's tail, a fulfillment of the prophecy that incest would bring about the family's downfall. The child dies shortly after birth, and Amaranta Ursula succumbs to complications, leaving Aureliano utterly alone. As Aureliano retreats further into solitude, the environment around him reflects the family's collapse. Macondo, once filled with life and wonder, has become a ghost town. Nature reclaims the village, and the vibrant community envisioned by José Arcadio Buendia at its founding becomes a distant memory. In the final moments of the novel, Aureliano deciphers the last lines of Melquiades' manuscript, realizing that it foretells not only the history of the Buendia family, but also its end. As he reaches the final words, a massive hurricane descends upon Macondo, obliterating the village and erasing it from existence. The storm is an act of cleansing, a symbolic end to the cycles of repetition and the weight of the family's cursed legacy. Aureliano dies as the storm consumes Macondo, leaving no trace of the Buendia family or the town they built. The novel closes with the powerful image of the manuscripts being swept away in the wind, their secrets lost to time. The destruction of Macondo and the extinction of the Buendia family serve as a poignant conclusion to Garcia Marquez's epic tale. It is a reminder of the impermanence of human ambition and the cyclical nature of history. As the story ends, readers are left to reflect on the themes of memory, solitude, and the inescapable pull of fate that define 100 Years of Solitude. Through its richly layered narrative, 100 Years of Solitude invites readers to reflect on the nature of time, the power of storytelling, and the fragility of human existence. It is not only a landmark in Latin American literature, but also a timeless masterpiece that continues to captivate audiences worldwide.